The Earth's magnetic field is collapsing. The magnetic poles are flipping. Earth's magnetic field might collapse in less than 10 years. These headlines have been going around lately, and they're freaking people out. But what does it mean for us, mere mortals? Does this mean World War III and the end of the world? Well, let's find out. Welcome to my channel. It turns out that the headlines about the magnetic field collapsing are actually referring to something real. However, there are some very important details being left out in these articles. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about what the magnetic field is. You can think of the Earth's magnetic field as an invisible force field surrounding our planet. It extends from the Earth's core all the way out into space. This force field is created by the movement of molten iron in the Earth's outer core. There's a lot of electrical current going on down there because this churning iron has unpaired electrons. And when you get lots of unpaired electrons together, you get a magnetic field. And the Earth's magnetic field is really just one big bar magnet with a north pole and a south pole. And these magnetic poles are not located at the geographic north pole and south pole. They're actually quite a bit closer together. Here the magnetic north pole is located in northern Canada, and the magnetic south pole is located in western Antarctica. And these magnetic poles do wander around and they wobble. In fact, over the past few decades, the magnetic North Pole has been heading towards Siberia at a rate of about 55 miles per year. That's about the same speed as the growth of my YouTube channel. But these magnetic poles can also flip. A magnetic pole flip occurs when the magnetic field lines connecting the North Pole to the South Pole all get tangled up and reconnect in a different way. When this happens, the magnetic North Pole becomes the magnetic South Pole and vice versa. And this is not just some abstract change in the Earth's core, it affects us here on the surface. When the magnetic poles flip, compasses point south instead of north. And it turns out that these flips are pretty common in Earth's history. We know that there have been at least 8 flips in the past 3 million years, which means that on average there's a magnetic flip every 400,000 years or so. However, we have no idea if the flipping follows any kind of schedule. Sometimes there's a flip every 100,000 years, and sometimes there's a flip every 2 million years. Who knows? Now you might be wondering, why is the Earth's magnetic field so important? Why should I care if it's a little wonky? Well, the Earth's magnetic field protects us from the sun. Out in space, there's all kinds of high-energy charged particles flying around. Some of those particles come from the sun, and they form what's called the solar wind. If these charged particles hit Earth's magnetic field, they mostly bounce off. However, some of them do penetrate our magnetic field, and if they hit the Earth's atmosphere, they can cause all sorts of problems. For example, they can mess with communications, and they can disrupt things like the power grid system. We have no choice but to live inside the Earth's magnetic field. It's not like we can just move somewhere else. So protecting ourselves from the sun's harmful radiation is pretty important. Scientists use satellites to measure the strength and behavior of the Earth's magnetic field. And back in 2003, the European Space Agency launched a satellite called Swarm that was specifically designed to study the Earth's magnetic field. One of the things Swarm noticed is that the magnetic field is getting weaker, particularly around the magnetic South Pole. Scientists think that the weakening field could be caused by a decrease in the Earth's rotation. If the Earth spins slower, then there's less of a magnetic field generated by the spinning charge particles in the core, and this effect has been going on for a while. In the 1970s, scientists noticed that the Earth's magnetic field was about 6% stronger than it is today. Now, even though the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker, it's still strong enough to protect us from the solar wind. However, scientists worry that it'll get weaker and weaker until eventually it won't be able to protect us anymore. In 2019, a group of scientists published a paper where they argued that the Earth's magnetic field would collapse in just a few decades. They used data from Swarm and other satellites to build a model of how the magnetic field evolves over time. They wanted to use their model to estimate when the field will weaken enough to no longer protect us from the solar wind. Their model predicted that the field would collapse sometime between 2025 and 2040, and that prediction got a lot of people worried. But there are two problems with this prediction. The first problem is that it relies on the assumption that the Earth's magnetic field will continue to weaken at the same rate that it's been weakening since the 1970s. However, there's no guarantee that this will happen. Maybe the slowdown in the Earth's rotation is already over, and the magnetic field has stopped weakening, or maybe it'll start to strengthen again. The second problem is that even if the magnetic field does continue to weaken at the same rate, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll collapse. The scientists themselves said that their model only predicts when the magnetic field will be 10% weaker than it is today. It doesn't predict when it'll completely disappear. And in 2022, another group of scientists pointed out that the 2019 study didn't take into account the fact that the Earth's magnetic field isn't just one giant bar magnet. It's really made up of multiple fields. The main field comes from the Earth's core, but there are also smaller fields generated by electric currents in the crust and the mantle. And these currents are affected by things like water and temperature. So the 2019 prediction might just be wrong. But it's not just wrong. The magnetic field is getting more complicated. Back in 2022, scientists reported finding holes in the magnetic field near the magnetic South Pole. They're calling these holes null points, and the weird thing is that these null points are actually magnetic field lines that have completely lost their connection to the Earth's core. Instead, these disconnected field lines form a sort of bubble that extends out into space, and there are hundreds of these bubbles popping up near the South Pole. Now, scientists don't exactly know why these bubbles are forming, but they suspect that it has something to do with the changing magnetic field and possibly the movement of the lithosphere, the Earth's crust, plus the uppermost part of the mantle. Basically, the Earth's magnetic field is evolving and changing in ways that we don't completely understand. So does that mean that the headlines were wrong? Well, not exactly. Yes, the magnetic field is changing, and yes, it may eventually get to the point where it can't protect us from the sun. But we're still a long way away from that happening. And we don't know when, or even if it'll ever happen. We don't even know if the Earth's magnetic field will continue to weaken at the same rate it has in the past. So predicting exactly when the magnetic field will collapse is just wild speculation, and there's no evidence that it'll happen in the next 10 years. The best we can say is that the Earth's magnetic field is changing in unpredictable ways, and we need to keep track of those changes. Thanks for watching this episode of SEI Show Space. If you want to help support this channel, we have a Patreon account. You can learn more about how you can help us keep making good science videos right here on our channel.